Happy Friday, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining again to another exciting Community Sync meeting. Today, we have a few demos from the team, and then we'll kind of take some general questions and general updates. Our initial agenda, I think, that we had proposed for today was that we would have Mr. Zetlin here to talk about extensibility and the targets concepts that he's introduced. He's run into a little hiccup doing some trying to update his driver's license, so he might not be here today. And if he's not, we'll end early and push that topic to next week. But in the meantime, we do have Stephen here with us today to talk through some of the recent updates to carts. So, Stephen, feel free to take your time, draw it out, and then we'll see if James is able to join us today.
I doubt he'll make it, but
I doubt he'll make it too.
I will. I'll take my time. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So today I'm going to demo two things that I worked on this week. The first of which is something that's sort of a quality of life thing that I've been meaning to get to for a while, which is that the cart creation, the initialization of a cart, if you are a new visitor to PWA or to Venia or to one of your sites that uses Venia, the initialization was done inside the cart trigger. And it was sort of done like that for legacy reasons that I won't necessarily get into, but it didn't really align with how I envisioned the cart creation happening, and it was sort of an unnecessary detail that we all just sort of had to be aware of. If any of you have tried to implement your own cart trigger or have tried to get rid of it or move it somewhere else, you may have noticed this. That it wasn't creating the cart correctly. And that's because the cart creation happened as an effect on mount of the cart trigger component. So if you hit it or you didn't render it, cart creation just wouldn't happen. So I had been thinking it might be more sensible to move it to the cart context provider, which is the thing that allows us to call this cart context hook. So this is a pretty minor PR, and you can see it's 2572, but all I've done is moved the effect from the cart trigger and all the code that was necessary to call this effect. I've just moved that into the cart context provider in Peregrine. So this is basically a one-for-one with that code that was in the trigger before. It's just that it now happens in the context provider, which is handy because it's closer to the root of the app. If for some reason you didn't want to render a cart component or have a cart on your website and you wanted to remove the cart context provider, you could do that and a cart would no longer be created. Of course, I'm sure that comes with a lot of other downstream effects that you'd have to handle, but the key is that cart creation and the existence of that ID is sort of like core to the cart, so it made more sense for it to exist in the thing that always has to exist when there's a cart, which is the context provider. One thing I wanted to point out was that I didn't use mutations or queries to create the cart like we've been asking people to do when they write their own components or modify talons. In most of the other areas in Venia, when you want to use a mutation or a query, we ask that you call the hook or pass in the GraphQL string from the component into the talon, which then invokes the use mutation hook or use query hook, and then whatever else needs to happen with that. But in this instance, there wasn't really a good place for that query to live because of the way that we create the context providers. And so I added a comment here just to explain, but I wanted to call this out, that though you'll see these, the GraphQL template string creator and the GraphQL tag import now in Peregrine as a peer dependency, This isn't a practice that we're trying to get used to. We want to just use it sparingly where necessary. And so, here we've got two very minimal mutations, or a mutation and a query. The mutation just calls that create empty cart, and this may even change eventually if we're going to get into customer cart, which is a different query, I believe, to fetch an auth user's cart. This right now just happens to return the cart ID for an auth user if the bearer token exists. Um, and then the second query is just a very minor query to check that the user is authorized because of some retry logic that happens in the action. So again, there's no functional changes to this except that cart creation just happens like higher up the tree now in the cart context provider. You really shouldn't see any bugs or anything with this. No regressions. This is just literally moving some code up the tree to a different place that's more global. So there's really not much more in this PR for me to go over, I don't think. So are there any questions about this specific PR before I move on? Okay, cool. It's pretty minor, so I didn't think there would be any questions. So the next thing I wanted to get into was something that Fu Man brought up in an issue, which is that if the GraphQL backend has some problems, there was an infinite error loop that would occur. And I did a little bit of digging, and I found that it was because of the cart creation logic that we had. So speaking of moving cart creation, um, so I'll demonstrate that first for you, and I'll do that by trying to, okay. So I'm just going to block all requests to GraphQL right now. You'll see some other errors, right? Obviously the site's not going to render right now, and I can probably demonstrate that. Actually, well, I'll show you what happens on develop when this happens. I hope I don't freeze my computer. All right. So right now, we're at 68 requests. We're going to see an error. Now we're at 72 requests, 73. We're just going to keep seeing these errors, 77, and they're just going to keep going, and it will never stop because what happens is inside the cart async action, we have this create cart, async actions file. We have create cart, which does a bunch of stuff to create the cart and return it. And then inside the, it's just going to be easier for me to show my code. Inside get cart details, which if you recall from the first PR I showed you, is the action that we dispatch when we start up the app. And this is sort of like incidental that what happens when you call this action is that when it first runs, if there's no cart ID in storage or in your reducer, it will dispatch a call to create the cart, and then it will retry the get cart details call after it's created one. The problem is that as you saw, this results in an infinite loop because the dispatch would ask for a cart, that request would fail. That request is up here. Right here we would throw, and then we would just dispatch an error, and that doesn't do anything to the stack, right? It just continues processing, which means that you ended up back here and you retried the thunk, which came back and said, oh, I still don't have a cart ID, so give me a cart, which would fail, and then it would hit this. So yeah, all I did was inside the create cart action. Now, when there's an error, we're going to log it first of all in development mode, so it's a little more helpful. We're going to do the same thing we were doing before, which is dispatching the action. But then we're also going to throw out of this action because it's the only way that we can inform the upstream actions, as far as I know, of a problem during this flow. So now get cart details, whenever it hits, now I wrap this in a try catch. Whenever the create cart action fails, it'll throw. We'll get the error here, and I missed a spot, and then it'll just return. Which means that it will allow users to continue browsing the site without things blowing up on them. So I can demonstrate that happening here just by throwing an error during create cart, and then let's see if we're over here. Yeah, we're at 175 requests now. I'm just going to close this. All right. So the flow is when there's no cart ID. So no cart ID in storage, and I'm going to refresh the page, and you'll see an error occur. There's that error throw, and these won't be logged in. I think one error will get logged in production if this happens, but as you can see, the rest of the site is functioning. You're able to do things. You can try to add an item to your cart, and I added a little helpful error message on this page too. There's a problem with your cart. Refresh the page. Try adding again. So hopefully this doesn't result. You never want to result in infinite error loops for users. So this at least will stop that and allow them to continue browsing the site if there happens to be a problem creating the cart. Obviously, if your GraphQL backend is down entirely, they're not going to be able to do anything. But I was trying to account for the specific case where that create cart failed for a network error, but other things were still functioning. So let's see. One thought I had, and one thing I did, was this error gets dispatched into the store, and this was happening already. But now I have I've stored that error inside the cart slice, and that means that you can handle it accordingly if you want by checking in your app file for get cart error, and you can throw a toast if you want, or you could update the actions to just straight up return if there's an unrecoverable error in the store. I didn't do this, and I didn't throw a toast yet. I felt like that was a little bit beyond the scope of this PR, but I did add it to the store now. So if there's an error with getting that cart, it'll exist in the store for you to check. And then here's that display for the product detail page. I thought I pushed. Didn't I push change? Huh, I must have missed some of these console logs. Okay. Yeah, that's about it for this guy. Is there any questions about the infinite loop problem that I was fixing? All right. Dang, I only burned 15 minutes. I'm sorry.
It's perfectly fine. All right, so if there are no questions for Stephen, again, I know we've had a few people join since we first started. The quick update here is that we were going to cover extensibility and targets. Mr. Zetlin had a last minute conflict, so he won't be able to make it today to cover that content, so we'll cover it next week. In the meantime, though, what we can do is quickly talk about some of the roadmap updates, updated roadmap for PWA Studio, and again, what our kind of current priorities are and what we're planning to address going forward in Q3 and Q4. So if that's of interest to everyone, let me just share my screen and we can talk through that. All right. So again, here, if you go to our GitHub repo in the wiki, there's a roadmap page, but you of course try to maintain and keep updated with all of our current priorities and near-term priorities for the project. We have a couple different views of our roadmap that, of course, are not on this page. But if you're interested, feel free to ping me. We have no problem sharing the kind of slide view of it, but it essentially contains the same information. So I'll walk through this really quickly. I guess quick update on our 7.0.0 release is that it is planned for next week. We covered the release notes on the call last week, but if you're interested in checking out those release notes, which is obviously important because it speaks to some of these current priorities, there is an open PR right now with the kind of rough draft or finalized draft of the release notes, which is 2542, PR 2542. So you can pull that up and check out the 7.0 release notes and what's in it. Mostly is kind of well, there's a lot in it, so I just won't say it's mostly just one thing. Anyway, moving back to kind of roadmap. So currently for Q3 and Q4, we're kind of working across a kind of few different areas, but the primary theme here for the team is around completion of B2C features and storefront features, as well as continuing to improve the developer experience. So at the top here, we see kind of some developer experience items. It's not, in a timeline view, so I can understand that there might be questions on timeline, but for the most part, from the top to bottom order, it is in a priority order. So currently, we have, Dave McCauley and the Obsessive Owls team who's working with us on PWA Studio now. They're taking on this internationalization and localization framework. Obviously, we're working from the PR that was contributed by Chris Brabender from the community. But that's a big focus for us for this quarter. We also have an epic coming up with scaffolding improvements. We've had feedback and seen some issues or bugs opened up from the community that have come in. We've kind of organized those into an epic, and then we'll also do some improvements around that dev experience for scaffolding. Multi-store is an item that we'll have down the line, but fortunately, I think internationalization kind of touches on some multi-store capabilities. So we'll look at what we can do in terms of delivering across both of those, but it is also a separate work stream on our roadmap. Extensibility, which we know is current, has been launched, started with 6.0, and then is the docs and the evolution of that framework is continuing in 7.0. Obviously, we meant to have Zetlin here to talk through that, but we'll make sure we have him and we continue to do some kind of training and more enablement around extensibility this quarter. And then that obviously leads into marketplace extensions and supporting marketplace extensions, which will be a conversation we continue throughout Q3 and Q4 and look at how do we pick that up with marketplace team and support those. Server-side rendering and SEO for SEO, right, is a kind of constant hot topic for us in the community. So we do have a roadmap item that we've built into Q3, end of Q3, going into Q4 for us to kind of readdress some of the things, the out-of-the-box kind of support for SSR within PWA Studio. So as we get closer to that, we'll make sure, of course, that we're being transparent on what we're planning to do there. But it is an item that we do plan to address. And then some kind of items there at the end are just Magento Commerce Cloud optimizations, working with the cloud team. We're looking at in Q3, Q4, how do we make sure that we're optimizing, the install and the implementation of PWA Studio and Magento Cloud, as well as improving things like Lighthouse, constant improvements around performance, and then quality fixes for developer experience. So I'll kind of just jump into the shopper experience real quick, and then I'll take questions around Q3, Q4. So to wrap up, or to continue Q3, we've obviously done cart and checkout over the last few months. My Account is the big feature that we're tackling in Q3, as well as the mini cart refactor. The mini cart refactor will, as we've kind of demoed on this call before, will turn mini cart into a true kind of desktop mini cart. And then we'll also make sure that we tie together the new cart and checkout experiences kind of fluidly throughout the app. My Account, there's details there for what we are planning for the initial phase of the My Account delivery. So all the way from account info, the order history, address book, wish list, stored payments, and communication preferences, all of the kind of stories that we're delivering against for the initial phase of My Account. So I know there have been questions there, so that detail is now listed on this page. And then we have Epic currently in design right now to add in the support for additional product types like grouped, bundled, virtual, and downloadable. So that's something that's in design that we'll be picking up after the current work on My Account and internationalization. And then we have some epics to round out Q3 and going into Q4 for adding in support for Mega Menu. Product recommendations team is actually working on delivering product recommendations for PWA Studio using the extensibility framework that we've recently launched. So that'll be something that comes in from their team, but we're obviously going to be tracking and making sure that everyone's aware of. And then lastly, around shopper experiences, accessibility, and doing a kind of full audit on accessibility and what it means for us to move forward and have some compliance or support for WCAG's kind of AA level of AA standard. So that's pretty much it for kind of rounding out this year and what we're focused on for this year. You can take a look at this page. You can look at what's coming up, what that means for Q1 and Q2 next year, and kind of some of the items that are out there coming out of the end of the year. But I'll kind of stop there and stop reading everything to everyone and ask for any questions. We will take silence to mean that our roadmap is perfect, everyone's happy, and there are no problems.
Looks great.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the new features. The new mini cart checkout experience looks great.
Thank you. Awesome. Yeah. Team has worked really hard on pushing out a lot of these features, and we're really excited about what's coming up too. So I think that'll be really, really great. Of course, I'd say since this is the call for the community, if you're looking to contribute in any of these areas, or you see something on the roadmap that you'd want to contribute that we're not currently focused on, feel free to reach out. Reach out to any of the community maintainers. Reach out to me. Reach out to Tommy Weevil on the team. And we can have those conversations. Which, if there are no other questions about the roadmap, I guess I will stop sharing and just ask Jordan, Lars, or Tommy, any updates for Community Corner?
Hey, I've got one additional question. So the multi-store support, can you guys talk through what your plans are there?
Yeah, there are no definitive plans as of now. We haven't set the scope for the Epic. Really, we're in discovery right now and doing some initial kind of research. Again, Dave, and I'd invite him to jump in here. But Dave has kind of identified that as we're delivering internationalization, there are likely going to be some areas where it might start to touch on multi-store. So we're trying to define that now and doing some additional research, but I don't think we've kind of fully fleshed out the details.
Okay.
Yeah, you're exactly correct, Andrew. We're still in the investigatory stage, so once we define how much of multi-store is required for localization, then we'll have a better idea of, how much of it is going to exist from this epic.
Okay. Yeah, I have had some success using the store header modification that was mentioned in the documentation. So just curious what your guys' plan was for this feature. That sounds great. Looking forward to it.
Hopefully the next community sync we can present, what our strategy and plan is so everyone kind of gets an understanding of which direction we're heading.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Of course. All right, so I will stop sharing my screen then. Again, that wiki page is available externally. Everyone can see it. So if you have questions about roadmap, feel free to reach out. Okay, so Jordan, Lars, Tommy, any updates on Community Corner?
Not that I'm aware of, but must admit I'm pretty unprepared today, so maybe Tommy, but
You're drinking a Heineken, so how prepared can you be?
true that.
It's laid back and relaxed time right now.
Just watching the show, right?
Yeah, from my side, it's
No,
also currently, I don't have anything to present or something like that.
Yeah, I would say no change since last week. I would jump on and show the project board again, but it would seem like a broken record. If anybody's interested in picking up work, there is a community backlog with prioritized work. We are aligned with all of the community engineering kind of point systems and all that, so everything's tagged and ready to go. We're also starting kind of a issue sponsor program where some of the more complicated issues that's going to require help from somebody from the core team, someone has assigned themselves as a sponsor for that issue. So I think there's a big one related to staging environments that James Zetlin is going to be the sponsor on. So that's a highly complicated piece of functionality, but he's willing to kind of help talk you through how that implementation should go. So if anybody's interested in some fun work, take a peek there and let us know if you have any questions.
Perfect. All right. Well, I guess that wraps us for today. And again, we'll get to extensibility from Mr. Zetlin next week, as well as more fun demos. But I guess thanks to everyone for joining. Have a great rest of your Friday, great weekend, and we'll see you all next week.
All right, see you guys.
See you. Bye.
Thanks, guys.